Aloha. I am of the family Tajiri. My first name is Simon Seisho. I'm here to tell you the story of Lana'i. In 1400, the chief of Maui, of Lahaina, Ka'ulula'au, comes to Lana'i to rid the island of man-eating akua, or the gods or spirit creatures of the island, that made it hard for humans to habitate. After 1400, the population of Lana'i expands and the civilization grows. Kamehameha unites the Hawaiian Islands, and Lana'i becomes a centering point for the many political activities. By 1800s, 1860s, Walter Murray Gibson comes as an American businessman and a representative of the Church of Latter-day Saints. He begins buying up much of the island and establishes a Mormon colony in the Palawai Basin, here in this area. From Palawai, Gibson acquires management of the entire island and changes it over into a sheep herding establishment. And from then, the ranch, the island itself, passes on to his daughter, Tallulah Ellison. After many ranching experiments, the land itself changes hands. So moving from Tallulah Ellison, the gay family of Kauai comes to Lana'i, and they begin experimenting with sugar beets, with all kinds of agriculture, with ranching, and finally with pineapple. The pineapple experiment is so successful that James Dole comes and he purchases the island from, it passes hands several times through Mr. Irwin to the Baldwin brothers and finally to James Dole. From the 1920s until 1992, the last harvest, Lana'i becomes what is renowned as the world's largest pineapple plantation for over 70 years, with ethnicities from all over the world working and bringing the famous pineapple of Lana'i. The multicultural community of Lana'i undergoes many changes during that time. Made up of predominantly Filipino workers, Lana'i is also composed of descendants of the early Japanese immigrants, Koreans, Chinese, Portuguese, people from all over the world. By 1985, the plantation is booming, and the community itself numbers at about 2,000. And around this time, David Murdoch, a shareholder in Dole, begins to purchase up Dole as well as Castle and Cook resorts. He becomes the sole owner of 98% of the island. And at that time, he begins plans of moving Lana'i from an agricultural economy into one of hospitality. By 1990 and 1991, two major hotel resorts open up. So the 90s into the 2000s, Lana'i becomes a premier resort for many people to come and visit from around the world. By 2012, these two luxury resorts managed by the Four Seasons is purchased by a new landowner, Mr. Larry Ellison. The Lana'i Culture and Heritage Center hosts many stone artifacts that evidence a rich, sustainable lifestyle of the Hawaiians since antiquity. For example, this poho pohaku, or stone mortar, and pohaku ku'i, or stone pestle, was used to mix medicine and other mixes used in daily life. The early Hawaiians had a great reverence and strong relationship to the food or the nourishment that came of the land. Kalo, or the Hawaiian taro, is accounted of in many legends as being a relative of the early Hawaiian people. This artifact here is a pohaku ku'i'ai, or a stone poi pounder that was used to carefully mash the taro corm to create the sustenance of daily living for the Hawaiians. So this ki'i, or stone petroglyph, is a stone drawing that exemplifies many stone drawings found all over the island of Lana'i. Scholars today don't really know the exact use or meaning of these drawings, but they speculate that it had a ceremonial use, or perhaps recorded some historical event, genealogy, or story.
tell us a little bit about the significance of the Ka'ahapua'a? And I apologize for my pronunciation.
No, thank you so much. If I may, and I will try to be very brief. You know, I have a hard time at brevity, but Ka'a, as it is properly pronounced, versus Ka'a in Keomoku. Different, yeah? Even though same spelling. That's the problem with Hawaiian words. Too few letters, yeah, so you gotta figure out the context. At Ka'a, it is the largest ahupua on this land. In fact, it was a land that was retained in the 1848 land division by one of the Kamehameha grandchildren. So it already tells us that there was, in the chiefly lineages, that there was something of significance to it, of value to it, okay? But in its history, Ka'a is the home to an incredible dry forest. Once, even when we were young, you're a little bit older than I am, but you know, when we were young, we could go out there, and there was still maile that had a leaf the size of my fingernail here. I think that that's all gone now. And when we went through native language accounts, we found that maile, not only did Tutu folks remember it and tell the story, but it was validated in 1860s, 1870s by accounts of visitors to Lana'i traveling out to Ka'a to see Keahiakawelo, which is now sadly called the Garden of the Gods. Sorry, real quickly. I know that you all know this is true, but we don't live on Lana'i. Fortunately, otherwise the porch is going to be pretty small, right? Yeah. We live on the island of Lana'i, as Tutu said it uniformly. And a part of our respect, a part of our plan, should really be that it is Lana'i. It's respect that we have regardless of what our background is, if we aloha this place, yeah? So, people who came to Lana'i visited Keahiakawelo, misnamed Garden of the Gods, by Alexander Hume Ford, or Ford Hume, who was here in 1911, and had just been to Colorado and saw the Garden of the Gods there. Wow, doesn't this look a little bit like that? And the name stuck. That's where it came from, 1911, that's all. But at Keahiakawelo, at Polihua, these were storied, famous places. Avalua. Simon mentioned plants. There's a plant that we typically call the beach vitex. It's like at Karen, at your house, planted around, and down below there, it has a beautiful little purplish blue blossoms, almost silver green leaves. It's a beautiful, beautiful plant. In antiquity, and up through Tutu them's time, Tutu Papa even wrote a song about it in the Song of the Churches. Polihua is adorned by the Ma Neva Neva, the famous lei of the land. Whenever Ohana would gather together at Mauka or go to Keomoku, those who wore lei of various places were identified by that lei as to where they came from. The last wild growth of this plant, a beach vitex, it's not extinct, except on Lana'i it almost is. The last wild growth that I know of on the entire island sits on the shore at Polihua, right next to Uncle's Moi Hole, right on the bluff up there. If we lose that, we lose a facet of our storied landscape. So why is it a sacred and storied place? It indeed is, and contrary to some popular belief of it being an arid, barren, desolate, waste landscape, it is a place that is filled with stories and history. If I may, real quickly, Keahiakawelo, this is a summary of the story. Kawelo is a priest of Lana'i, Lanikaula is the priest of Molokai. A feud arises, though Lana'i didn't know they were involved in a feud initially, and the people of Molokai, the priest, are praying the people and the livestock, the little piggies and Elio doggies like that, to death. And this is circa 1400 based on the genealogies. Kawelo realizes what's up, and he builds a fire, and I believe we know exactly where that place is now. He builds a fire, and he wards the prayers of Molokai back with his own and the fire. One day he learns where Lanikaula hides his excrement. And I know this sounds a little unpopular maybe, but in the old days they believed that you could take maunu, bait, you could take a fingernail, someone's hair, some private part of their, waist or something like that, and you could use it to call the spirits to kill them. Ana, sorcery. okay? Believe it or not, this was what they believed and how they practiced. Cabello learns this secret and paddles under the cover of dark to Moku Ho'oniki, a little island off of the Halava side of Molokai. He ascends the pali end of the dark, grabs a couple of uwala, sweet potatoes that have been filled with bits of the excrement. By the way, this story comes from Tutu Ape Kauila and Tutu Daniel Ko'ofuiki. This is their tradition. And he tucks those uwala under the folds of his malo, walks past Lani Kaula just to see if he's really as potent as everyone says he was. And he doesn't have much power, does he? Because he doesn't see his own death walking past him. Cabello brings the kukai-filled uwala back to Lana'i. On his fire, he places them with prayers. A black smoke erupts out of the fire. Clearly it wasn't the wind, ho'omoi pili, that causes the pili grass to blow and lay down from here. It was the naulu coming from the southwest, because that black smoke was pushed through the forest of ka'a and paumai, turned the lehua tree blossoms purple, o lehua, rather than the reds and yellows. And up until Tutu them's childhood, when they were like 10 or 15 years old, the last two of those known purple lehua trees were still found on the edge of Mahana. The people of, oh, by the way, the black smoke erupts. Lani Kaula sees the smoke and discerns the omens. He's on the ground dead. And the people of Lana'i are safe. So in tradition, this view plane from Kiahia Cabello across Ka'a, Aumai, Mahana to Moku Ho'oniki, these aina here from, just get an idea, probably this is basically in here, across this whole section here, out to Molokai, to that little islet and to the famed Kukui Grove of Molokai, is one of those traditional cultural landscapes that are qualified under the National Register Bulletin for preservation as well. So it is a historic landscape, but we could say the same for all of Lana'i. All you have to do is step out anywhere and you will find the signature, the evidence of our parents, grandparents, and the myriad generations before them.
Arriving on Lana'i in the 1970s, you would have arrived at the airport and been greeted by this large billboard sign, which boasted Lana'i as one of the most premier and perhaps largest pineapple plantation in the world.